INFJs love differently, not because they feel less, but because they feel too much. At some point, they realize that loving purely from emotion leads to exhaustion, heartbreak, and misunderstanding. So they evolve. They start loving logically, with awareness, boundaries, and balance. It's not that they stop caring, it's that they start protecting the parts of themselves that once gave too much. In this video, you'll discover what happens when an INFJ stops loving through emotion and starts loving through clarity, when their heart and intuition finally work together instead of against each other. If you've ever reached a point where you had to choose peace over passion or logic over emotion, this video will feel deeply familiar. Stay until the end, because the transformation of an INFJ's love is one of the quietest, yet most powerful evolutions you'll ever witness. And before we begin, I want to hear from you. Do you think love without logic can truly last? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to Brainy, where we uncover the hidden emotional intelligence of deep, introspective minds like yours. They understand that feelings without boundaries create chaos. For a long time, INFJs believed that love meant giving without limits. They opened their hearts completely, feeling every shift in energy, every unspoken emotion, every wound in the people they cared for. They thought their empathy was a gift, but over time, it became their greatest burden. Because when you feel everything, you start losing yourself in everyone else's pain. You begin to confuse helping with healing and love with rescue. At first, it feels noble to love selflessly, to be the safe place for others to fall. But slowly, the INFJ starts to realize that endless compassion without boundaries only breeds emotional chaos. They start noticing that the more they give, the more people take, that some don't want to heal, they just want to be held while staying broken. And that realization cuts deep, because the INFJ's love has always been sincere, never strategic. Eventually, through heartbreak and exhaustion, they begin to evolve. They learn that real love doesn't mean losing yourself to prove your care. It means knowing where you end and where someone else begins. They stop overextending their empathy and start protecting their energy. They begin setting quiet boundaries, not out of coldness, but out of wisdom, because they finally understand that when love lacks limits, it turns into self-destruction. So when an INFJ starts loving logically, it's not because they've stopped feeling, it's because they've learned that emotions without structure can become a storm. Beautiful, powerful, but impossible to control. Now, they love with both heart and clarity. They know when to give, when to step back, and when to let go. Their empathy becomes guided, not endless. And in that balance, their love transforms from chaos into peace. It's the kind of love that doesn't burn them out anymore. It fuels them. The kind of love that isn't desperate to be seen, it simply is. And once they reach that level of emotional intelligence, their heart becomes their compass, but logic becomes their map. They learn that logic protects the depth of their heart. INFJs are emotional visionaries. They see the world through layers of feeling, intuition, and meaning. When they love, they don't just connect with someone's surface, they connect with their essence. But that same depth that makes their love so rare also makes them vulnerable. They tend to see what could be in people instead of what is. They forgive too quickly, overlook red flags, and believe in potential more than patterns. And over time, that emotional openness leaves scars. After enough heartbreak, the INFJ begins to realize that feelings, no matter how pure, can't guide every decision. They start noticing how their compassion has often been mistaken for weakness, how their empathy made them easy to manipulate, and how their silence was taken as consent. That's when logic steps in, not as a wall, but as armor. It becomes the lens that filters emotion through reason, helping them protect the parts of themselves that used to be so easily broken. They learn to analyze behavior instead of just absorbing emotion, to ask, does this person match my energy, instead of, do they need my healing? Logic becomes their emotional boundary, the quiet strength that reminds them not every connection deserves access to their depth. It's not that they stop loving deeply, they just stop giving that love recklessly. Now, when an INFJ feels something powerful, they pause before they act. They let time test the truth of their emotions. If it grows, it's real. If it fades, it was fantasy. That's the power of logical love. It doesn't kill emotion, it refines it. And when an INFJ reaches this stage, their love becomes almost untouchable, still warm, still genuine, but guided by clarity instead of chaos. Because logic doesn't make them cold, it keeps them safe. It allows them to love without losing themselves. And that balance between emotion and intelligence is what finally allows their heart to flourish in peace, not pain. They stop trying to save people who don't want to grow. For most of their lives, INFJs have been the quiet healers, the ones who see potential in broken people and believe love can fix what trauma has damaged. They pour time, empathy, and patience into people who give them pieces of change but never transformation. They wait, hoping that maybe one more act of kindness will spark awareness. But what they don't realize until much later is that not everyone wants to be saved. Some people are comfortable in their chaos because it gives them attention, excuses, or control. The INFJ eventually learns this lesson through exhaustion, not logic. After countless cycles of giving and forgiving, they notice a pattern. The more they help, the less they're respected. Their compassion is mistaken for compliance, their patience for weakness. And that realization cuts deeply because all they ever wanted was to see others evolve. That's when the shift happens. The INFJ stops being the emotional lifeguard and starts becoming the observer. They understand that healing can't be forced, it must be chosen. They stop pouring energy into people who recycle their pain and start investing it in their own peace. Instead of rescuing others, they rescue themselves from overcommitment, from guilt, from emotional exhaustion disguised as love. It's not that they stop caring, they still feel deeply, perhaps even more than before, but now their empathy has boundaries. They offer support, not sacrifice. They understand that love should lift, not drain. And in that clarity, the INFJ finally breaks the savior cycle. When they love logically, they know that true connection isn't about fixing someone, it's about walking beside those who want to grow. And once they master that balance, their energy stops scattering across lost causes and starts flowing toward purpose. It's in that moment they realize saving themselves was never selfish, it was necessary. They choose clarity over emotional confusion. For a long time, INFJs lived in emotional fog, reading between lines, decoding mixed signals, and trying to make sense of people who said one thing but felt another. Their empathy made them experts at understanding complexity, but also victims of it. They'd get caught in the gray areas, half promises, inconsistent actions, unspoken feelings, and stay far longer than they should, hoping that one day everything would make sense. But emotional confusion is addictive. It keeps the INFJ engaged, overthinking, analyzing until they realize the confusion itself is the answer. When an INFJ starts loving logically, that's the moment they choose clarity over chaos. They stop trying to interpret what people might mean and start paying attention to what they actually do. They no longer chase closure through endless conversations or explanations. Instead, they accept that consistency speaks louder than emotions ever could. If someone's behavior creates confusion, that's already clarity. It means that person lacks alignment, maturity, or honesty. This shift doesn't make them cold, it makes them powerful. They stop emotional guessing games and begin living in truth. They ask direct questions, set clear boundaries, and listen more to actions than apologies. They no longer tolerate people who keep them in a constant state of doubt because they know peace feels better than potential. At first, this new mindset feels strange, even lonely. The INFJ misses the emotional highs that came with intensity and chaos, but over time, they realize that calm, clarity is far more fulfilling than emotional turbulence. They understand that love shouldn't require confusion to feel meaningful. It should feel safe, honest, and steady. And once they choose clarity, they stop being drawn to people who thrive on emotional unpredictability. They find themselves surrounded by stability, by those who communicate openly, act consistently, and value peace as much as they do. For the INFJ, choosing clarity is the ultimate act of self-respect. It's the moment they stop trying to feel right and start choosing what is right. Because when they finally see through emotional fog, they realize they were never asking for too much. They were just asking the wrong people. They Balance empathy with emotional discipline. INFJs are naturally empathetic. They feel before they think, sense before they speak, and absorb emotions before even realizing it. Their empathy allows them to connect deeply with others, but it's also what leaves them emotionally drained. They've spent years trying to comfort people who mistook their compassion for availability. Every time they felt someone's pain, they carried it as if it were their own, until their spirit became heavy with emotions that weren't even theirs. But something changes when the INFJ starts loving logically. They begin to realize that empathy without structure turns into self-destruction. They don't stop caring, they start caring intelligently. They learn that not every emotion deserves an emotional response, and not every person deserves full emotional access. They start balancing heart with awareness, realizing that compassion must be guided by discernment. This is emotional discipline, the art of staying kind without becoming consumed. The INFJ learns to observe emotions like waves rather than drowning in them. When someone vents or manipulates, they don't absorb, they analyze. They ask themselves, is this energy mine, or am I carrying someone else's burden? That single question becomes a shield that protects their peace. They begin responding with intention instead of reaction. They choose silence over explaining, calmness over confrontation, and boundaries over burnout. People might call them colder, but in truth, they've just learned that empathy is most powerful when it's not self-destructive. This balance transforms them. They no longer feel guilty for prioritizing themselves. They can still understand others deeply, but now they do it without losing their center. Their empathy becomes a skill, not a wound. And once they master emotional discipline, their energy becomes magnetic, calm, clear, and controlled. They radiate strength through serenity. Because an INFJ who learns to balance emotion with logic doesn't stop being kind, they just become unshakable. They realize that love without reciprocity isn't love. For INFJs, love has never been casual. It's an all-in, soul-deep experience. They give with intensity, empathy, and consistency. When they love, they don't measure effort. They pour themselves completely. But over time, that generosity becomes their downfall. They start noticing a pattern. The more they give, the less they receive. The emotional balance tips quietly, leaving them drained, while the other person thrives on their constant giving. It's not that the INFJ expects grand gestures in return. What they crave is emotional presence, the same sincerity, attention, and loyalty they offer. Yet, they often attract people who take their warmth for granted, mistaking it for endless availability. Eventually, the INFJ realizes that love without reciprocity isn't devotion, it's depletion. This awakening isn't born from bitterness, but from clarity. They begin to understand that one-sided love isn't noble, it's self-abandonment in disguise. They see that genuine connection can't exist if only one person is growing, caring, and investing. Love, they learn, should expand both hearts, not just drain one to fill another. When INFJs start loving logically, they stop romanticizing imbalance. They set boundaries, not to limit love, but to protect it. They start matching energy instead of emotion, observing consistency instead of promises. They no longer chase connection. They let mutual effort reveal it naturally. That's when their relationships begin to change. They attract people who don't just take, but give, not because they're asked to, but because they value balance as much as the INFJ does. In the end, the INFJ discovers that real love is reciprocal. It's not about intensity, it's about harmony. When they stop overgiving, they finally make room for someone who meets them where they are, not someone who only takes what they offer. They begin to value stability over intensity. For most of their lives, INFJs have been drawn to intensity, the deep conversations, emotional highs, and soul connections that feel electric. They believed that love had to be powerful to be real, but with time, that intensity starts to feel like turbulence. It burns fast, then fades, leaving confusion and exhaustion in its wake. After too many emotional roller coasters, the INFJ realizes something crucial: peace is stronger than passion. When they start loving logically, they begin to crave stability, not because they've become cold, but because they've grown wise. They've learned that consistent warmth lasts longer than unpredictable heat. They no longer romanticize chaos or mistake chemistry for compatibility. They see that calm love is not boring, it's safe, grounding, and sustainable. This realization changes everything. The INFJ stops chasing emotional sparks that burn them out and starts choosing connections that feel steady and mutual. They look for people whose energy brings clarity, not confusion. They value presence over promises, effort over intensity. They learn that a quiet moment with someone who truly understands them is more meaningful than 1,000 passionate words that lead nowhere. In their past, they may have mistaken emotional drama for depth, but now they recognize that real depth lies in peace, understanding, and emotional safety. They start protecting their mental space with boundaries, refusing to let anyone disturb the harmony they've worked so hard to build. And as they choose stability, their entire energy shifts. They attract people who value consistency, maturity, and growth. The INFJ's calm becomes magnetic, their love more powerful because it's intentional, not impulsive. For the INFJ, valuing stability over intensity isn't losing passion, it's mastering it. It's learning that the deepest connections aren't the loudest, they're the ones that make your soul feel at home. They stop interpreting mixed signals as hidden meaning. For a long time, INFJs were experts at reading between the lines, sometimes too much so. Their intuition made them masters of decoding tone, silence, and unspoken emotions. When someone sent mixed signals, the INFJ didn't take it at face value. They searched for depth, assuming there had to be something real hidden beneath the confusion. They believed inconsistency meant fear, emotional wounds, or hesitation, anything but disinterest. But after being burned by people who thrived on emotional ambiguity, the INFJ learns a painful but liberating truth. Mixed signals aren't deep, they're disrespectful. They realize that someone who truly values them won't make them guess their place or doubt their worth. Genuine intentions are consistent, not cryptic. Love doesn't require translation. When they begin loving logically, they stop trying to decode inconsistency and start trusting patterns. They no longer fill in the blanks with empathy or overanalysis. If someone disappears, they no longer chase. If someone's words don't match their actions, they no longer make excuses. They understand that clarity is the language of emotional maturity, and confusion is the mark of manipulation or emotional unavailability. And confusion is the mark of low and unlived experiences, and confusion is the mark of manipulation or emotional unavailability. This shift changes how they love. The INFJ's empathy becomes sharper, more selective. They begin saving their emotional depth for people who speak in truth, not riddles. Their intuition, once used to justify mixed signals, now serves as a filter, cutting through uncertainty to protect their peace. No more reading silence as interest or chaos as chemistry. The INFJ finally accepts that genuine connection doesn't require constant decoding. It feels steady, safe, and self-evident. And once they stop searching for meaning in confusion, they find something far greater: peace in clarity. They learn that love doesn't need to be mysterious to be meaningful, it just needs to be real. They see detachment as a form of emotional maturity. There comes a point when the INFJ no longer sees detachment as coldness, but as wisdom. In their past, they used to think caring more was the right thing to do, that empathy meant staying emotionally available no matter how much it hurt. They'd stay in situations long after they'd outgrown them, hoping love, understanding, or patience could fix what clearly wasn't meant for them. But eventually, they learned that being deeply feeling doesn't mean being endlessly available. This realization changes how they connect. They stop pouring energy into people who only take, and they stop confusing attachment with love. To the INFJ, detachment becomes the art of staying kind without losing peace, of being compassionate without becoming consumed. It's the balance between caring about people and carrying them. Detachment gives them emotional clarity. They begin to see situations for what they are, not what they wish them to be. They stop fighting to be understood and instead focus on protecting their energy. When someone tries to manipulate them through guilt, silence, or emotional chaos, the INFJ doesn't react, they observe. Their stillness becomes their strength, and their distance becomes their protection. It's not that they feel less, they actually feel more, but they've learned how to manage it. They still love deeply, but now with boundaries. They still care, but with discernment. And most importantly, they've realized that detachment doesn't mean disconnection, it means freedom, the freedom to love without losing themselves. To outsiders, this version of the INFJ might seem colder, but to those who truly know them, it's clear this is the INFJ at their most evolved. They've learned that emotional maturity isn't about how much you hold on, but about knowing when to let go, peacefully, gracefully, and without resentment. They love smarter, not harder. When INFJs finally evolve past emotional chaos, their love becomes refined, intentional, not impulsive. They no longer give endlessly, hoping love alone will heal, fix, or inspire someone to grow. Instead, they begin to choose love with awareness. They've learned through heartbreak that loving harder doesn't create connection, it often creates dependency. So they shift their focus from giving everything to giving wisely. To love smarter means understanding balance. The INFJ now knows that their energy is sacred, it can nurture or destroy, depending on where it's placed. They stop investing in people who drain them and start aligning with those who reciprocate, respect, and match their emotional maturity. They no longer fall for potential, they fall for presence. They no longer confuse intensity with intimacy. This version of love feels quieter, but more powerful. It's built on clarity, consistency, and communication, not fantasy or over-analysis. When the INFJ loves now, it's not because they need someone, but because they choose them from a place of peace, not pain. Their empathy still runs deep, but it's no longer blind. They've learned to listen to their intuition when it warns them instead of silencing it in the name of love. They see red flags not as challenges to fix, but as signs to walk away. They understand that love that costs peace isn't love at all. And perhaps the most beautiful part, they realize that loving smarter means starting with themselves. They pour into their own growth, their purpose, and their calm before sharing it with another soul. Because now they know, when you love from fullness, not emptiness, you attract the kind of connection that doesn't drain, it expands. That's how INFJs evolve, by learning that the smartest love isn't about giving more, it's about giving right. When an INFJ reaches this level of emotional evolution, something profound happens. They stop chasing love and start embodying it. They no longer see relationships as something to complete them, but as a reflection of the peace they've built within. Their love becomes quieter, wiser, and deeply intentional. A love that doesn't beg to be seen, but radiates effortlessly. And if you've ever reached that point where your love no longer drains you but strengthens you, you've stepped into the rare kind of peace most people spend their whole lives searching for. If this message resonated with you, remember, your depth isn't a weakness, it's your greatest strength. Never apologize for feeling deeply. Just learn where to place that energy. If you're an INFJ who's learned to love smarter, not harder, tell me in the comments what was the hardest lesson you had to learn about love. And if you felt seen by this video, make sure to subscribe to Brainy One for more insights into the INFJ mind, where silence speaks louder than words and depth is always celebrated.